Okay, this is the little pattern that we're going to make, and I wanted to come through and show you a little bit about it before we get started. This pattern is bloomers. Here's your bloomers underneath. They're nice and big bloomers, okay? Little diaper cover. And it's attached to a skirt that goes down over the top of the entire bloomer. The bloomer is on the inside and the skirt is on the outside, and it shares the same waistband. So the waistband is attached to the bloomer and attached to the skirt. Okay, just so you can kind of understand how the pattern works. The ruffles are not attached to the bloomers in any way except here at the waistband. So let's get started. A word on fabric choice for this little skirt. The ruffles on it are really full, and so it's best if you use a lighter weight cotton, maybe a cotton blend if you can find one. So just a really nice lightweight cotton, not a stiff cotton like a quilting cotton. Even might be a little bit heavy because these are for such little girls, and like I said, they're really full. Hi, this is Cindy from Vintage to New with another pattern tutorial. This is my little bloomer skirt, and what it is it's a pair of bloomers, okay? The bloomers don't have a side seam, so the back and the front are attached. It's a pair of bloomers that shares a waistband with a skirt that goes over the top that has two really full ruffles. So to do this pattern, you need to cut the waistband, the bloomers, your top ruffle, your bottom ruffle, and you're going to need either some store-bought bias tape, or you can make your own by just cutting a 1-inch strip of fabric. We're not going to be going around any really tight curves, so it doesn't have to be cut on the bias. It can just be cut straight across grain. So once you've cut out your pattern for the bloomer, take a safety pin and mark where the back is. The back and the front look a lot alike, but they're actually very different, and throughout the pattern you need to keep track of where the back is. So put a safety pin in the back. Okay, so the first thing I did is put my right sides together and sew the center back seam and the center front seam. So those are sewn. If you have a serger, you can use a serger. If you don't have a serger, sew using a 3/8 inch seam, and then trim it down and then zigzag, overcast the edge so you have a nice finished edge. So then what you do is you just take it and open it up like this. Okay, so now here's my center front, here's the center back, okay, and this is the crotch seam right here at the bottom. So go ahead and sew across the crotch seam. Okay, so just that quick, we have the basic part of our bloomers already done. So before I attach all the other things to it that make it bulky, I'm going to do the leg openings here. Okay, so here is the crotch seam, and working on the inside, the right side of the fabric, take your bias tape, whether purchased or the one that you made, and place it at the crotch seam, okay, and fold back approximately a 1/2 inch at the very start of it. Okay, so it looks like that. It gives us a nice finished edge right there. And now we're going to take it over to our machine and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Let me show you what that looks like. So here I am starting out, and you can see here's the part that I folded up, and I'm working on my bias tape, and I'm just going to sew right along that first fold. That's at a 1/4 inch, okay, and I'm just going to keep my raw edge of the bloomer and the raw edge of my bias tape nice and even, and very slowly work my way all the way around. Okay, you can see I'm just about back to where I started. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this bias tape so that I have enough to fold back about another 1/2 inch the other way. I'll show you. So I've cut it. Now I'm going to fold this back so that it butts up right next to the fold that I started with. That's just a tiny bit too long. I'm going to cut it down a little more. Okay, so just don't cut it too short. So there it goes. It's butted up exactly to that, and then I'm just going to sew back across. Now I'll show you what's next. So here's what it looks like. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to turn my bias tape under like that into the inside. And if you'll notice, you end up with a really nice seam here on the outside, and I'm going to sew right along this outside fold right here. Okay, so what I'm doing is forming a casing for my leg elastic. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I've turned my bias tape inside, and I have my nice edge right here, and it's very flat and nice and neat, and I'm going to sew really close to that outside fold, and I'm going to sew all the way around. Okay, I have sewn all the way back to the beginning, and I've made sure that all of my edges are folded down nice and neat. See, I have a little slit right there, and my edges are nice and lined up. So I'm just going to sew across and a little farther down to where I started, like that. And here is my casing, and you can see that I have room right there to put my safety pin in to run my elastic through. Okay, I checked the chart and I've cut my elastic, and now I'm going to take my safety pin, I'm going to insert it into the casing we just made, and then just start wiggling the safety pin and pulling the elastic through that opening that we made. Okay, now the trick to this is you do not want to pull this end of your elastic into the casing. If you do, then you have to pull it all the way through and start over, because there's no going back if you pull it in. So anyway, go all the way around. I'll meet you at the other end. Okay, because there's a fold right here, sometimes your safety pin will get stuck in that little fold that goes back. Not always, but sometimes. So take something like a chopstick or anything that will fit down into this little opening right here. Push it in past the fold, and then work your safety pin back behind that chopstick, just till you get past the start of the fold. See, and it'll come right out. So anyway, there's that. So just pull your elastic through. Now I'm going to take this over to my machine, and I'm going to attach these two ends together. Now on little elastic like this is 1/4 inch elastic, I don't necessarily try to overlap it. I'll just take it over and I'll just sew the two ends one on top of each other back and forth. Okay, you can see I securely pushed those, or sewed those together. So now I'm just going to pull it so that it goes down inside this casing. And you want it to go completely down inside. And then you just keep pulling it around to evenly distribute it. And make sure it's just not wanting to go in. It's kind of a big bump going into that little casing. So anyway, just keep working it and it will go in. Okay, so the elastic is in the casing, and now I'm just going to zigzag across this little opening right here. So you can see I zigzagged across there, went right through the elastic, which isn't a problem, and so now it's nice and sewn closed. And that little bit of stitching right there is in the crotch of the pants, so it's not really going to show. So anyway, we've got one leg done. Go ahead and repeat those steps on the other side. Okay, so boom, just that quick. Your little bloomers, the bottom part is almost done. So now I want you to take your waistband. This waistband is a little different than probably any pattern you've ever done before. So go ahead and sew the back seam, either with your serger or your sewing machine, and then I'll be right back with you. Okay, so we're going to start working in the back of our bloomers. Here's our pin to make sure we know that that's the back. Here's our waistband sewn together. Okay, now I want you to take the right side of your waistband and put it to the wrong side of your bloomers on the inside of the bloomer. So it's like that. So it's the wrong side, the right side of your waistband to the wrong side of your bloomers. And I want you to pin it all the way around. Whoops. So just take your time and pin all the way around. So here is our waistband pinned on the inside of our bloomer, okay, with the, just like we talked about, the right side to the wrong side. And now we're going to sew around the top using our 3/8 inch seam. Okay, so now you can see that I've sewn all the way around. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the waistband out like this, and we're going to work the seam so that it's nice and flat. We're going to, roll it between our fingers, make sure that we have all of that seam in there just nice and flat. Then I'm going to press it all the way around the top. So here's our waistband turned to the right side. Now if you were using a printed fabric, your printed side would be here. This is actually going to be the casing and the start of the top ruffle for your skirt. So like I said, the bloomer and the skirt share the waistband, but the skirt goes over the top. Okay, so now we're going to go over and we're just going to do an 1/8 of an inch top stitch all the way around the top. Okay, you can see I did an 1/8 of an inch top stitch all the way around. So now I'm going to go over and I'm going to measure 1 inch from the top of this fold down, and I'm going to sew 1 inch all the way around except for in the back. Okay, remember our back is right here, and I'm going to leave an opening about 1 inch on each side of the center back seam. That's going to be where we're going to insert our elastic later. So let me show you what that looks like. So you can see where I sewed 1 inch from the top here. This is 1 inch down. You can mark that with a ruler, or if you have the markings on the throat plate of your sewing machine, you can use that. I'm going to be inserting 3/4 inch elastic, so that's still going to give me enough wiggle room in there to get it through. But here's the back that I wanted to show you. You see how I left it open here and here. We'll close that up at the end, but for right now we need to leave that open for our elastic. Okay, so now I've taken the top ruffle and put right sides together and sewed what will be side seams for these ruffles on the top ruffle and the bottom ruffle. So now I'm going to go ahead and put a narrow hem, as small a hem as you can put in, so maybe like turn up, 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch, and then just top stitch it down. Okay, so do that on both of your ruffles. Okay, I have the hem in both the bottom ruffle and the top ruffle, and you can just turn them under like I told you, but I wanted to show you that I just ran a serger stitch along the edge, turned it up, and sewed it down because I wanted it to be the least amount of bulk down here that I could. You could also use a rolled hem on your serger if you wanted to give it even less bulk. But if you don't have a serger, just turning it up twice and top stitching it down would be just fine. So the next thing we're going to do, when I do ruffles and gathers, I like to have reference points so that I know that I'm getting all of my ruffles and gathers even. So I'm going to make sure that the side seams here match with what would be the side seams on this little bloomer. It doesn't have side seams, so I'm just going to take a pin and mark where that side seam would be if it was there. Okay, and then I'm going to also match where the center front and center back would be. So that gives me 4 points of reference, and I'm going to use the same on this. So here's my side seam. I'll mark the center front and the center back, and then when I do all my gathers, I'm going to gather them up between those points. I'll show you what that looks like. I wanted to show you my gathering stitch. To do a gathering stitch, you just use the longest stitch that you have on your sewing machine, and I like to have a little bit of overlap at the beginning and the end here so that you don't have a gap in your ruffles. So anyway, oh, and the other thing I wanted to show you is when I marked my center front, center back, put your pin down low enough that the gather will go above it and it won't be in the way. Okay, so now I'm going to match this up, pin it on, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's what it looks like before I start pulling my string to do the gathering. You can see that there are 4 sections, and each section has to have this much pulled up and pinned within each section. Now, when you get ready to do your pulling your threads, you pull the bobbin thread on your gathering stitch and just pull it up. And you can pull from both directions. So you use one of the strings to go this way and one of the strings to go that way. That way you don't have to gather the entire garment just from one side of where you started. So anyway, do all your gathering and make the ruffle fit the top skirt. Okay, you can see now that I've got it so that it fits on there just perfectly, and I know that my gathers, my ruffle, is evenly distributed all the way around. I'm not going to have a whole bunch in one area and none in the other. So now let's sew it on. Okay, when you're sewing on a ruffle like this, you see how it gets kind of bunchy? You want to make sure that you keep your raw edges lined up and that during your gathers, you don't have any of it tucked under or, you know, kind of piling up. You want to keep it nice and even, and you want to give this a little tug down here. See how nice and straight that makes it? Okay, and then you just start sewing it on. Take your time when you're doing this, and be sure you keep it nice and straight and no pucker unders anywhere. Okay, and the other thing that's really important is to remember to take your pins out. Of course, you don't want to run over a pin. That usually isn't very good for your machine, but it also keeps it from getting bunched under. See, now look, if I were to sew that right there, do you see how that's pulling under? I want to make sure that's pulled out so that my gather is just nice and flat. And then my raw edges line up. So anyway, take your time, sew that all the way around. Okay, your pattern's going to look like this. After you get your first ruffle on, go around and just check everywhere to make sure that you like the way each of those ruffles is, or each of the gathers is sitting. And if you don't like something, take it out and fix it before you do the next one. So our next one, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to take our last ruffle, we're going to gather it up, and it goes over the top of this ruffle. So we're going to divide it into quarters, we're going to pin it down. The only difference is going to be is we need to really be sure that this ruffle here is laying nice and flat when we put the other ruffle over the top, and then we're going to sew it down. See you in a minute. Okay, you can see I have my ruffle gathered and it's going on top of this other ruffle right here. So I'm going to make sure that when I pin it, that this ruffle down here doesn't have any twists in it like this and that I'm pinning over the top. I'm going to make sure that that ruffle is nice and straight, and then this one's going to get pinned on top and sewn on top of that so that it's nice and neat. So I'll do that and then I'll get back with you. Okay, so I have the second ruffle sewn on. So here's the casing and the top ruffle and the skirt. Now, this seam here is really ugly. It's got so many little frayed pieces of fabric and stuff. If you have a serger, run it through the serger. If you don't, take some time and trim this up so that it's nice and neat, and then zigzag all the way around. Okay, I just wanted to show you the seam where we attached all of our ruffles. It's kind of a bulky seam, and by the time you're finished, it has a lot of fraying and threads and stuff like that. So I finished it using my serger. Like I said, you could trim that off and zigzag it, okay? And then I pushed it up this way and then top stitched around the top. And by doing that, this really bulky seam helps it lay flat, and it'll help your skirt to lay nice and flat. So now we're ready to do the elastic. Okay, my trick for doing elastic, sometimes it's hard to get the elastic to go through and to know whether or not you have any twists in it. I make an X on this side and I make an X on that side. It's the two sides that are going to go one on top of the other. See how there's no twists in that elastic? Okay, so then I take my safety pin and go through this side here, and then I'll pull it through, and then I can know that I line it up. Now this is the back of our skirt. Okay, remember we left an opening here in the center back. To get to that opening, you have to push the skirt up so that you're right next to the little bloomers, the little diaper cover, and then you can put your safety pin in there and wiggle it through that opening. So I'm going to push it up to where the casing is and just gently work it through that top casing all the way around. Okay, I have both pieces of my elastic coming out through the casing. Okay, I'm going to line up my X's, and I'm going to have maybe not quite ½ an inch on each side overlap, and I'm going to sew back and forth 3 or 4 times across this elastic to secure it together. Okay, you can see it's all sewn together. So now I'm going to pull it into the casing, and I'm going to spend some time and distribute all of these gathers around the top. Okay, so the gathers at the top are nice and even, but I still have this opening here in the back, so I'm going to sew that closed. Okay, so I'm ready to sew that opening closed, and I've gone back 3 or 4 stitches. You can see them sticking out here so that I'm sure that it will stay stitched. As I sew this closed, I just pull the elastic tight, sew like so, and back stitch, and now that opening is closed. We're almost done. If you notice, the front and the back of this look virtually the same. The only way you could tell is because you might be able to see where you sewed that opening closed. So we still have our safety pin in here marking which one is the back. So what I'm going to do, so that you can find the back of this really quick and easy when you're trying to get your child dressed in the morning, or if you have a little one who's trying to learn to dress themselves, just make a little bow out of a piece of satin ribbon. And I like to take a lighter and just touch the end of the bow in a lighter, and it keeps it won't fray that way. So then I'm going to place this in the center back, and I'm going to sew through the elastic on both sides, attaching that bow nice and tight, and you'll be able to tell that that's the back. Okay, so we've got to this point right here. Here's the little bow. You can see where it's tied on, sewed through. Okay. Now we can decide if we want to add any embellishments to the skirt. I'm going to do a little bow right here for the front, and it's just going to be a very simple bow. This is a 2.5 inch wide piece of fabric, the width of the fabric, and I'm just going to put it right sides together and sew my 3/8 inch seam down the side. I've done all of that sewing, and now I have this really long, thin tube. And so to turn that right side out, all you have to do is take your safety pin and attach it to just the back of your tube, just the back right there of your tube, okay? Then take your safety pin and point it down inside the tube, and then start wiggling it through. And it's going to take just a second to get it started, to get it so that it wants to go down inside of itself. But once you get it going, there it goes, you just keep wiggling and pulling and wiggling and pulling, and you just keep working it all the way down until it's turned right side out. So you just keep pulling until it turns itself completely right side out. Now I'm going to take this over, and I'm going to work this seam so that it lays flat, okay, all the way down the tube, and then I'm going to press it. Here's my tube completely done and ironed. So I'm just going to tie a bow, kind of like you normally would, making sure to keep it nice and flat in the center and flat coming back through this way. No twists. And I'm going to work it until it's a good size, the size that I want it to be. Oh, kind of like so. That looks pretty good. Maybe just a little big. Like so. Okay. Then I'm going to decide where I want it on here and how long I want these ties to be. And I'm going to trim them off like so. And I left enough room that to finish them off, all I'm going to do is tie a knot in the end of these. Okay, so nice tight knot in the end. Like so. And then you can either sew this on the front, or you could use a safety pin, but I don't recommend the safety pin as much because it could come off and the little child could get a hold of that. So basically I'm going to sew this bow on the same way I sewed this one on. I'm going to just tack it on each side of the knot in the middle. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay, I pulled this little centerpiece knot over, and you can see where I sewed straight through everything right there. Then I lifted this up and I tacked it down right there the same way. So that bow is very securely attached. And how cute is that? Your little skirt with your little attached bloomers is done. So happy sewing from Cindy at Vintage to New, and until next time, happy sewing.